Hey now! What is up, everybody? My name is Mike Brown, aka Review King MB, and man oh man, I am glad to be talking about this episode of Smallville entitled Jitters. And I say that I'm glad because I feel like this episode has one of those infamous type legacies, right? When you hear people talk about this episode, I think people take away sort of Tony Todd's performance, maybe his situation and the effect of what he has going on with his condition maybe comes across as silly and cheesy to some people, but I actually think, in my opinion, that this is a strong episode. I think there are a ton of good things about it. I can't wait to get into it. So right off the bat, you see Clark, who gets right out of the fridge cold pizza and starts to eat cold pizza. Now I want to mention this because I know there are some people who like cold pizza. In fact, I know some people who prefer their pizza cold, which I know, but that's a thing. And I'm not saying that I've never had cold pizza, that I'm not like against cold pizza. It's fine, right? Especially if you're in a situation, if you're in a place where I can't warm it up or I'm too lazy, so you'll just eat it cold. Cool. But is it better? I wanted to ask people in the comments below. Let me know, do you prefer your pizza cold? Because Clark seemed to enjoy it quite a bit. In fact, I was wondering, was he going to use heat vision to heat it up? But I don't think Clark has developed heat vision quite yet. You see that the Kents are leaving for Metropolis to celebrate their wedding anniversary. And so they're leaving the house to Clark. Clark will be home alone. And so what does he do? Well, he throws a house party. Oops! And now I know Clark's initial intentions were just to have a couple of friends over. At least that's what he tells Chloe. He seems more interested in inviting Lana. So it's like, oh, okay, he wants to throw a party and have Lana there with a few other friends. And that's, I was going to say that's his chance, that's his shot. But like, she has a boyfriend. I don't really know why Clark is putting himself in situations where he's longing after this girl that has a boyfriend. And like, I know that like she's hot. I get it, but goddamn, like one episode he tells Lex, no, I can't pursue her because she has a boyfriend and she's off limits. And then in this instance, it's like, well, you are making yourself kind of fall for her even harder. Lana does show up though to the house party, which is quite interesting. In fact, she shows up without her boyfriend Whitney. And she claims when Clark asks her, like, hey, what are you doing here without Whitney? Lana says, look, I don't need to be around Whitney to have a good time. Which is interesting. Like, I'm trying to remember, which I know this sounds bad because I'm watching these week to week. I'm trying to remember if Lana and Whitney left off on, like, some bad note here. Because Lana seems kind of, I don't want to say disinterested, but she does seem like she's like, I'm kind of getting over this Whitney guy. Maybe what Lex was saying to Lana got to her a little bit, because I do remember Lex saying that she should date Clark. And hey, maybe in her mind she's sort of exploring these options. Or maybe it was the fact that Clark on her birthday, that's where we left off. He did the whole drive-in movie theater for her. So I guess she's sort of having certain thoughts. And this house party is insane. This looks like the house party from Project X, where there's hundreds of people here, hundreds of kids here. Clark is like, what happened? Did Pete invite all of these people? How did these people hear about it? Or why are all these people here? I'm feeling anxious for Clark to see everything sort of get wrecked, the whole house. He knows he's fucked. And there's even one scene where he goes to sit down and then this other kid sits down next to him and he's like, oh, dude, I'm going to hurl. And I love this moment where Clark super speeds himself over to the other side to get a bowl, run back over, and put the bowl in the kid's hand. The kid's drunk, so he didn't notice that Clark did that. I thought that was great. I know it's super simple. I know it's super non-special maybe in the current modern day traditional sense, but I like the idea, and it's too bad we didn't get this more often in even the other DC CW shows like The Flash, where he's just in a normal situation, a normal party situation, and he's using his powers to do something that seems so small, but like in that moment was a big deal because you don't want the puke all over his parents' living room, that's for sure. And then Whitney shows up. Oops! Whitney shows up because I guess he heard about the party. He sees that Lana's there. He's kind of upset. He takes her outside. And in fact, they go into Clark's barn to have a conversation. I thought that was weird. You know, you go into somebody's barn that like you don't even live there. You don't. This isn't your area. This is technically Clark's fortress of solitude, he said in a prior episode. So they're talking and they're kind of arguing about her being there and not telling him that she's going to be there. And she's like, "Oh, I didn't think I needed your permission, bitch." Well, she didn't say bitch. But Lana kind of had that attitude. I'm not going to lie. They hear some rumblings and shaking upstairs. I didn't mention the one scene where we actually saw Metropolis, I think for the very first time. Not the scene where Jonathan and Martha are at the restaurant and she's trying to call the house, but Clark's not answering because of the party, obviously. But yes, that was Metropolis. But there's another scene of Earl, played by Tony Todd, who first he creepily sneaks into this house where we see this woman and then we see this baby, and then he shows up after she leaves the room, and he looks very sinister at first. He looked very Candyman-like for obvious reasons, but I think they purposely played it to make us think that he's a straight-up villain right off the bat. And then he does this shaking thing, and it's all very odd and weird. He ends up wandering to, I don't know if it was, I guess it was Luthor Plaza, it said. He's asking for Lionel Luthor. He's saying something's wrong with him. The janitor there's trying to whatever. Earl accidentally jitters around and breaks the glass and jitters again and kills the janitor by accident. So you go back to the house party, and Earl made it to Smallville in Clark's barn because he was looking for Jonathan, because come to find out Earl used to work at the farm years ago and he wanted Jonathan's help. So they call the cops, or not the cops. They bring him to the doctors and the cops show up. And the scene was great when there's a scene where Clark is at the hospital with Chloe. And they're sort of waiting for like what was going on with this Earl guy. And Chloe has an interesting comment where Chloe says, he seemed like he was on drugs. He seemed like he was going through withdrawals. And Clark's like, no, I knew Earl. I grew up with him on the farm. I spent hours with him. He's not that guy. And Chloe says, Clark, you could spend a lifetime with somebody and not ever know their deepest and darkest secrets. And coming from Chloe, Alice Mack, given her later situations, I don't know. And something about her delivery of that just seemed very... She clearly did not trust this Earl guy. And that's when, you find out the other stuff is going on, right? Clark finds out from the cops that he's wanted for murder. Earl is. And I like the scene where Clark goes back home, sees that the house is trashed. There's food everywhere. It's a mess. And I like that he initially is like, oh man, this sucks. What am I going to do? And then he just super speeds and cleans the house super fast. I thought that was great. The effect of that's always great. And I love the moment when he turned around and Jonathan and Martha Kent are standing right there the whole time. They had already been home. They already saw the house destroyed. And they were just waiting to shit on Clark. And that was actually funny. I forgot about that. Luckily for Clark, he doesn't get in too much trouble because he brings up Earl. Nice save. And he's telling them about what happened. They go to the hospital. Earl tells Jonathan about what specifically happened to him, right? That he worked at the Luthor plant. He was on level 3. A big explosion happened. He got sick. they are now saying that level 3 doesn't exist. It's this whole cover up, and Jonathan's kind of iffy on if he believes him. Right, Tony Todd's doing a great job of seeming sympathetic, but like it's hard to tell if he's delusional or if something else is going on. Now, it just so happens, what a coincidence, that there is a school field trip for the Smallville High kids to go to the Luther plant. And they're there, and there's actually a moment where Chloe's father, who works at Luther plant, I forgot completely that Chloe's father works at the plant, and it's a fun moment of like, he's super cheesy, the father, he's super like making dad jokes and just totally embarrassing her. And I like seeing Chloe get embarrassed. We don't see a lot of that. And to be honest, I don't know how often we see her father like after this. How many more times, if ever, do we see Chloe's father? I mean, I don't know, maybe none. Now, Earl somehow winds up at the plant. He's in a suit. Like, how did he get there? He's wanted for murder, so he snuck out of the hospital. There's even a scene where I think the cop was in the middle of transporting him back to Metropolis, but in the elevator, he shook. So I guess he got out of the handcuffs. He must have knocked out the cop. In fact, there's only one cop that's bringing this guy back. You have to suspend your disbelief for a minute, but to suspend it so far to where somehow Earl got to Luther Plant, got past whatever security is probably outside the doors and whatnot. I mean, granted, he used to work there, so maybe he knows a back door or like a back entrance. I don't know. I couldn't help but not think this. Now, he goes to this door, and supposedly behind this door, it's supposed to be an elevator. But the elevator's not there. It's just a big wall. And he freaks out. Once again, Tony Todd doing a great job. I think Tony Todd's acting was great throughout this episode. In fact, I will admit that, yes, the actual condition that Earl has, where he's jittering and shaking, yes, it's goofy. And it looks a little silly. There's no doubt about that. And that's what probably people make fun of this episode the most about. It's just the actual thing he's going through and how it looks. But I would argue that Tony Todd's performance, Tony Todd's acting is so good. He's so convincing. He's just so doing a great job of pulling this off. I think if it wasn't for Tony Todd being in this role, being cast as this, if this was played by anybody else, this would have been rough. This would have been a rough episode because it takes a great actor to have to pull something like this off. And you get this moment of Earl just snaps and he gets a gun. Again, he snuck in there with the gun. He takes the students hostage and he's freaking out because he wants to know where this level 3 is at. And I love, here we get the introduction of Lex Luthor. We don't see enough of Lex, I think, in this episode. This was a great episode for Lex, specifically. He comes in this nice car. I like that because there's like a gate with all of the parents and all of the other media outside yelling and complaining. They want answers. Their kids are in there. When Lex shows up, he allows for Jonathan and Martha to come in. I like that a lot because Lex is trying to get them to like him. And you hear Lex explain the situation. It's a standoff. It's a hostage situation. And I like that Lex, he doesn't believe about the whole level 3 thing, but he does want to help, right? Eventually, Lionel Luthor, John Glover, shows up. And what an introduction for John Glover. You thought Lex's introduction was great. John Glover shows up with a helicopter. I love that Lex is like, it's my father. He's here. And Lionel's whole thing of like, oh, of course there's no level 3. John Glover plays this role so well. I almost missed how good he was because we don't see him in every episode. He's only a special guest star at this point. We need more Lionel in this show, and luckily we do get it. And it's just immediately you don't trust this guy. He's saying stuff that I think even Lex is questioning. And there's a moment where Martha even gets upset and says, "No, you gotta talk to this guy. Because not only does he need help, but these kids are in danger." And Lionel's like, "We don't negotiate with terrorists. Let SWAT handle it." And that's when Lex says, "All right, you know what? I'll do it. I'll go in there and I'll talk to this guy." And Lionel says, "Don't pretend to be a hero. It's not worth it." And Lionel just, it's weird how John Glover plays this. I mean, weird in a good way, because he tells Lex not to do it. But when Lex insists that, like, "I'm going to do this, this is my responsibility, this is my plant, I run this, it's my call," Lionel has this almost smirk on his face, like as if, I couldn't tell if he was proud of Lex for sort of stepping up or putting himself in that danger, or if he smirked because he was like, "This guy, my son is going to get himself killed, and I find it hilarious." You know what I mean? Like, that look and that smirk could have been played in so many different ways, and we don't quite know exactly how he meant it, which is more interesting. Lex going in there, and he has a bulletproof vest, but he takes it off to show that he's serious about it. This is a great moment for Lex to just be like, "I am willing to save these kids and put myself in danger." Like, I like seeing Lex as the good guy. I like him trying to not be his father, trying to be better than his father. I love when the kids are being escorted out, Lex is able to convince Earl to let them go, and then he'll show him level 3. The kids leave. Clark stays behind because Clark knows that, like, this, I need to help Lex. He's in danger. And then there's a moment where, because one of the gas valves got broken off, the gas levels are rising up, they're in danger of exploding. The SWAT team outside tells Lionel that, like, "Hey, this place might blow. We need to close the doors, seal the doors, so that if there is an explosion, it doesn't get out." And Lionel says, "All right, do it." With his son in there. So Lex being killed in a fire, Lionel's like, it's a sacrifice worth making so that, this doesn't look worse on his PR stunt. This is wild. This, like, there's so many, for as silly as people might say the episode is, given its own situation, I think the stuff with Lex and Lionel is the stuff that I think I got the most enjoyment from, which is probably why I am so high on this. Clark, because he stayed behind, he goes to the door that Earl was talking about. He breaks the wall, finds the elevator that he was talking about. So, oh shit, Earl was not lying. Earl was not crazy. There is a level 3. And Clark tells Earl this. They go into the elevator. Lex is still kind of not believing it, saying that this can't be the case. Earl finds the secret button that takes him to the level. And Lex is in disbelief. Lex is legit saying, "I didn't know about this. You gotta believe me." Earl doesn't believe him. I like that Lex was trying to tell Clark that he didn't know about this. "You gotta believe me, Clark." He cared if Clark believed him. And Clark does say, "It's okay, Lex, I believe you." Again, they are in a good place at this moment. And I want to live in this moment where Lex and Clark are in a good place, because I know it doesn't last. No future spoilers. And so Earl starts having another episode where he's shaking and shaking, and the bridge platform that they're on breaks off, and so they're hanging from it. Clark, I didn't mention that because Earl, this whole explosion that Earl was talking about where he got the jitters from, it's kryptonite that exploded into his body. So he has kryptonite fragments, meteor fragments, in his blood. And so when Clark gets close to Earl, he gets weak. So he can't be around him, or he can't touch him, like, he gets weak. And so when they're hanging off, Clark is having a hard time trying to pull them up. He's weak, right? But he's still able to do it. Even Lex has a moment where he says, "How did you pull both of us up?" And Clark's just like, "Adrenaline." But Lex, I don't think, is all that sure about it. So Clark does save Earl and Lex. I honestly didn't remember if Earl survived this episode. And I like the end of it when Lionel is spinning to the media that, like, "Hey, this was just a storage level. It's a mix up, and Earl was sick and blah blah blah. And that's when Lex comes in and says, "Well, that's why we're gonna take care of this man's medical bills. We're gonna make sure that he's fine." It's too bad we never got like an update on Earl. I'm pretty sure we never find out if he gets cured and whatnot. I wouldn't be shocked if Lionel had him killed secretly, because that's the type of person he seems. And even after Lex said that we're going to take care of his medical, Lionel just sort of pushes the media away and turns over to Lex and gives him a hug, but like not in an endearing way. He gave him a hug to shut him up, basically, so that he wouldn't say anything else that could make him look bad. And that fake hug that Lionel was giving Lex, and Lex looks over and sees the Kents hugging Clark in a genuine way, in a way that parents should be hugging their son, given that they could have lost him, that the sons could have died. And to see Lex see that, how parents should be treating their kid, to see the fake hug that Lionel is giving Lex, it's so tragic. This episode for Lex ends in such a tragic way, and for the short amount of time that Lex was in this episode, this was strong. I very much enjoyed Jitters. I know it's not the most popular episode, but I think there was a lot of good stuff here, a lot of great stuff here. Let me know in the comments below, what did you think of Jitters? Is it too silly for you? Can you not get into it? Or, hey, Tony Todd fucking brought it. This is the first time I'm watching something with Tony Todd after he passed away, so RIP. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Later!